Lee Alberson, I believe this is his, I was counting, I think your 11th rodeo.
Now, is this like Saturday Night Live? Do I get a jacket? Judah, what do you think about that? Should we start getting jackets made for like 5-timers and 10-timers?
We get, you want a green Masters jacket? You want a gold Hall of Fame jacket? Is that what you need? This guy's a diehard sports fan as well.
Okay, all right, yeah. Doesn't that seem about right, Jeff?
It does, yes.
We're going to stream on all social media, and if you guys have some comments or some questions that you want to relay on air, if you want to give these fellas some props, please put it in the feed. We're talking grading equity, and we're talking a topic that I think is near and dear to many. I have heard from a significant amount of moms on this topic, like an incredible amount of moms on this very topic. So we're going to make sure we bring up Mr. Ken O'Connor's repair kit for grading and kind of analyze the do's and don'ts on repairing grading. Something I've dubbed the everybody gets a trophy of education. As a competitive guy, I find it a little irritating, but these guys are the experts. J-Dubs, we're in your hands, my friend. We can rock and roll. Hold on one second. We'll welcome Sammy Nadalo. Welcome Sammy from Richmond, watching the program right now. Scott is watching the program. Scott Carter in Crozet, hello and welcome to the show. Sharon Dowdy, hello in Belmont and welcome to the program. Wanda, welcome to the program. Renee, who's watching in Fluvanna, give the show a like and a share anywhere you are watching. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll. Good Wednesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love Seville show. Thank you kindly for joining us. Super pumped for today's program. Jeff Prilliman and Lee Elberson in the house. Two righteous dudes, man. Two cool guys that are going to help make some sense of a topic that I think is very tangible and real. Something that has been conversation at many dinner tables. I know it has at my house, our neighbors' houses. And I've been kind of keeping my ear to the grindstone with viewership and listenership, and it sounds like this is a topic of conversation not only amongst parents, but amongst educators in multiple school systems in the area. The topic is grading equity, and the topic pertains to Albemarle County Public Schools as they infuse grading equity into the curriculum. It started some in COVID, and it's really proliferated itself this semester across the school system. We'll go over Ken O'Connor's pitch deck, his repair kit for grading, the do's and don'ts to grading equity. We'll give some props to Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine, for being a part of the show. Dr. Wagner has your back. Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. Tink Fiber Internet is the crazy fast internet that powers the network. Cindy Elberson, the co-chair of the Lee Elberson fan club, is watching in Louisiana. We love you, Cindy. I feel like I know you, even though I've never really met with you or talked with you.
You will get a chance to meet her next time she comes to the show.
You watch the show. Thank you, Cindy. If you guys want to interact with our guests, just put your comments in the feed, and we will relay them live on air. Judah, let's go with the studio camera first, and let's welcome our guests. Lee, introduce yourself to everybody, my friend.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think Jerry was saying this is my 11th time on I Love Seville, which means that Jerry must be a glutton for punishment, listening to me babble for so long.
It means I like you. You're my friend.
Appreciate it. As everyone knows, I've been in Charlottesville, I think, now for 8 years, and I'm very passionate about Charlottesville community. Two of my main passions are education and entrepreneurship, as evidenced by where I spend my time. In my business, Claiborne Education, and in the Community Investment Collaborative. If there's any time left over, my wife and I are camping. That's pretty much it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Two of this gentleman's main passions are education and entrepreneurship as well. Jeff Prilliman, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I got into education in '99, taught at Albemarle High School for about 15 or 16 years, been at the county level for a half dozen years, helped create the MESA program at Albemarle High School, and more recently, I've taken a leave of absence to focus on my business, told Jerry last time we're celebrating 30 years this month. Cavalier,
awesome.
Yeah, Cavalier sports cards. Sports cards are pretty hot right now, so enjoying life, selling little pieces of cardboard.
Congratulations, 30 years. Wow. 13 for this company. How many, Claiborne?
Claiborne is celebrating its 13th year. This is his 12th year, so
30 years, props, dude.
That's unbelievable, Jeff.
It's been strong.
That's amazing. All right, I'm going to get out of your guys' way. You guys are the experts. Jeff, we'll start with you. Grading equity, in particular, the pitch deck that's going around from Ken O'Connor, the repair kit for grading, open-ended question, anywhere you want to go.
So, and I'll just start. Most of what Ken has done can be considered good, where we want to not grade learning, but we want to grade the summative assessment. So less grading on formative assessment. So just for our listener, formative assessments are when I, as a student, am learning. Is it homework? Is it practice? Is it maybe a quiz? It's something designed to show me what I need to know and what I need to learn. We sometimes place too much emphasis on those formative assessments. We talked a little bit about that last time. Summative assessments are when a student is sitting down taking a test. So what's the difference? You know, when I say I'm going to grade homework, well, that's where I'm learning material. I don't want to necessarily be grading that because I use that to figure out what I don't know. All too often, and this is something Ken, stresses, we're grading the learning as opposed to grading what I'm supposed to have learned.
Lee Alberson.
Yeah, I think, Jeff's the expert here, but yeah, just looking back at what I see in the broad spectrum of students that we serve at Claiborne, I think, you could make the analogy to, let's say somebody wants to be a professional squash player, Jerry Miller, and you're looking at how he's progressing, and you say, hey, you're going to have these matches every week, and you're going to practice for these matches, and at the end of the season say, hey, you won all your matches, but you actually didn't do perfect because in practice you didn't do as well as some of the other players. And what makes this inequitable is, for instance, a family could come in and do a ton of tutoring in the summer, and those students are just going to start. They're going to start and hit the ground running, and they're going to basically be operating at their best level the whole way. Whereas a student who doesn't already know this, they are going to make plenty of mistakes throughout the semester and the school year, and that's a good thing. Making mistakes is part of the learning process, and so by focusing more on the end result and saying, hey, what we're trying to do is build your competency so that at the end you've learned the same and focus less on, how specifically did you practice and how did you act in class?
Well, that's one of the things that Ken mentions in his repair kit is gauge the most recent learning heavier. So let's just say I'm taking Spanish and I come in first semester and I make a 50, and second semester I'm at a 70, third semester I'm at 80. End of the year I'm making 100, I ace the final exam, I ace, all of a sudden, should that, 30, 40, 50 I made first quarter, how should that impact my grade? Because realistically, I could have a failing grade where I just made a 95 and 100 on the final, because I'm learning and building on skills. You could argue the same with mathematics, where I'm learning and building on skills to evaluate more recent performance heavier than, something that I did 8 months ago.
Okay, I'll throw this to you guys. You guys are the experts. I just keep the tempo flowing, okay? I'll use a sports analogy. We're sports guys here. Someone goes into the season, the regular season. Let's just take the NFL. And in the off season, the summer, the spring, they grinded in the weight room. They focused on adding muscle, they focused on diet, and they came into training camp in better shape than they ever have. So the first week of the season, they were performing at peak performance versus an athlete or a player that goes into training camp in the first game of the season after coasting through the summer and coasting through the spring. By what you're saying, are you not marginalizing the efforts that someone puts into the summer before the school starts? Because all the effort that they put in the beginning, they're getting results from day one, versus someone who didn't put that effort in before school starting, they're not getting the results from day one. I'll get out of the way on that topic.
Yeah, Jeff, I know there's a lot to say this. I don't think it's a great analogy, but okay. I coming from somebody who doesn't know anything about sports, I do know that there is a common phrase, nothing matters if you don't win the last game of the season, right? I think the reason why the analogy doesn't make
Very
sense,
nice.
the analogy doesn't make sense is because the person who's working hard during the summer in terms of academics likely has tremendous resources to be able to work hard and learn more, whereas somebody who is not, like, would you consider working hard, is likely less resourced.
You agree with that?
That's where the inequity comes in.
I think so. I mean, and to the analogy, it doesn't matter if you don't win the last game, right? It's the bottom line is, did the kid learn? Did the student master the material they were supposed to? And then what's the journey? Yeah, I took 8 wrong streets to get there. You went to a direct path. You got there earlier. My job as a teacher is that kid that gets there earlier, to give them additional work to prepare them, to give them additional things where they develop critical thinking skills or higher thinking skills, but understanding that this student just took a little longer to get to the final destination than another student. But so one kid gets a 100, the other kid gets a 93, you know, or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know that I want to differentiate when the two do the same at the end of the year, what the journey was.
Your friend Darren Peixoto is watching in California.
Got the name right this time.
I did.
Man, massive props to you.
Hello, Darren. Rick Randolph is giving you some props. California in the house. Nashville, Tennessee in the house. North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Charlottesville, Crozet, Northern Virginia in the house here. Comments coming in via Twitter, which we will get to in a matter of moments. We're going to cut to the chase, and we have a mom named Leslie who watches our show all the time. Leslie, good afternoon, in Keswick. She says, Jerry, let's get to the point here. Ask your guests about the don'ts on the pitch deck. Don't include student behaviors. Don't include reduced marks on work submitted late. Don't give extra credit or extra points. Don't punish academic dishonesty. These are the don'ts that we all care about as moms. How about Lee to start on that?
Yeah, so I think it's important that, you know, I guess that you would call like a pivotal work on this is Joe Feldman's Grading for Equity. He's got a nonprofit organization, has done a lot of speaking engagements, and is really a big proponent of moving this movement forward. And so I think, you know, the behavior in class, you know, sorry, that was one of the don'ts, right? Don't grade on the behavior in class. The reason
And I struggle with that in school.
Yeah.
And I was graded on my behavior.
Mm-hmm. The problem with that is there's a ton of implicit bias. No
fair.
matter how, I mean, if you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, you're still going to have tons of implicit bias. There's no way to get rid of them. And so behavior just inherently has a lot of inherent bias, and it depends on, you know, the student's resource depends on how the teacher's feeling that day. And so you want to remove that because, as Jeff said, if the end result is that they are struggling, maybe their behavior, they're acting out because they're not understanding and they're going through all of those missed turns, as Jeff said, and at the end, they've learned more, you want to take out that implicit bias. What were some of the other don'ts?
The don'ts, I'm going to read. In fact, why don't I read some of the don'ts, and Jeff, will get you in the mix here.
Sure.
Here's some of the don'ts from the pitch deck. Don't punish academic dishonesty. That one just blows my mind. Don't consider attendance and grade determination. Don't include group scores and grades. Use only individual achievement evidence. Don't organize information and grading records by assessment methods or simply summarize into a single grade. Don't assign grades using inappropriate or unclear performance standards. Don't assign grades based on student achievement compared to other students. I mean, life does not work that way. Don't rely on evidence gathered using assessments that fail to meet standards of quality. A couple more for you, Jeff, and I'll get out of the way. Don't rely on the mean. Consider other measures of central tendency and use professional judgment. Don't include zeros in grade determination when evidence is missing or as a punishment. And there's a lot of other don'ts, but for the sake of a talk show, let's get Senor Prilliman in the mix here.
So is that one of Ken's, don't assign zeros?
Those were all from Ken.
So how does that conflict with don't assign extra credit? It's if a kid doesn't do something and I give them a 50, well, that's extra credit at the max. So those two statements would be in conflict with one another, right? So I think zeros can be problematic in corrupting a student's grade, but I think the one right before that, using professional judgment, that's something where, is a kid getting it? I've made deals with students over the years where you don't have to do your homework because you're getting 100 on every test I give. I'm going to give you some other assignments to go home and think about this or do some research on this topic or something. But for that student, if they didn't do their homework, if they're knocking out hundreds on every summative assessment and they're getting zeros homework, are they a B student? Are they a C student? It's not fair to evaluate their homework on the kid that maybe needs it to learn. So part of our job as an educator is, what does the child need? It's one of the reasons we stress building relationships with students. We need to know who our students are as learners, what they need best. You think about things like homework, which tend to be fluff grades. 10 or 15% of your homework is just to build your grade up. But there's the kid who needs homework, who needs that extra practice. There's the kid who doesn't need it. There's the student who probably needs it, but they go home and do it all wrong, and now just reinforce the incorrect way to do it. And then there's the kid who doesn't do it because they're so confused it doesn't make sense to them. And so now all of a sudden, what are we doing to a student when we assign homework / busy work / something that I want critical thinking assignments to go home for homework versus 1 through 59 odd, which is all too often what we end up doing.
Lee Alberson.
Yeah, so I got a ton to say on it. Sorry, I'm just taking notes on this. First, I'll just affirm something that Jeff said. I had a class in college where after the first homework assignment, the teacher came up to me and said, he's like, just show up for the final. He was like, I'd like to give you an independent research project, because I displayed such proficiency that what's going to happen, and the reason why Jeff and similar teachers do this is because I'm going to lose engagement. If you're giving me something,
you're going to be bored out of your mind.
Yeah, if it's something very easy for me, I'm going to look for something else to fill, that's going to excite me. And so that's why teachers like Jeff do that and say, hey, look, it's clear you could do this. Let's give you something that will keep you fascinated and engaged in this, and then we'll base it on the end result. If you can pass just like everyone else, then it doesn't really matter how you got there. I think in thinking about the way the grading is structured, it is kind of interesting when you look at the sort of 0 to 100 range. It is biased towards failing. 2/3 of the grades are failing. The other thing that was mentioned is, does a 0 make sense? I think you could give an example where, let's look at a student who had 2 B's and an F. Jerry, I'll ask you, if you saw a student and he said, hey, he had 3 assignments, there was 2 B's and an F, what grade would you give that student?
I'm going to say that guy is a low C student.
Okay, what about you, Jeff?
So, and that's what were the B's on? Mm-hmm. And what was the...
Let's say they were all...
They're all the same type of grade,
mm-hmm.
then that student has demonstrated they understand approximately 2/3 of the material.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but...
So what is that student from a...
From grade standpoint, you said a low C, a middle D, something like that.
Depends on what those are, though.
Yeah.
If those 2 are low B's and that's a 0, you average those out, that kid's going to flunk.
Yeah.
That kid's going to... So this part of the problem with that, and we talked about this before the show, 0 to 100 is a pretty arbitrary range, and I think that's what we're trying to get away from, is removing some of the arbitrary nature of selecting, hey, is Jerry is he a 73 student or an 85 student? Like, that sometimes depends on mood. The other thing that's mentioned, and something that you could use to get around the issue we just talked about, is she talks about the mean. It's, should we average grades? Like when you're averaging grades, let's say 5 assessments throughout the school year, you're equally weighting how they learned at the beginning as opposed to how they learned at the end. And if you're trying to push forward the fact that they learned the material, you shouldn't be averaging. We don't, like when you look up stats, they don't show average housing price, they don't show average income, they show medium income and medium housing price, because that's much more representative of what the sample is. And average is bonkers. You could look at a neighborhood, it takes one $2 million house and it just throws off the average, or one dump that throws off the average as well. So it might make more sense to use maybe the mean or the mode or something like that.
Jeff Perlman.
Well, the average Amazon employee makes 6 figures just because Jeff Bezos. So, so average is one of those things. But that's the one thing I like about Ken, is that the professional judgment of the educator. The thing that I'll push back a little bit, 0 is punitive in a grade book when compared to the 100-point scale. At the same time, that 0, what does it represent? So when we think about, okay, there's 60 points of failure, or there's 60 points of, I haven't mastered this content yet. So if I'm getting a 40, that says I don't know 60% of the material. If I'm getting a 50 because I've been gifted a 50 and I didn't do anything, I've demonstrated no mastery of content. So understanding what those grades represent, and that's one of the reasons that we shouldn't average stuff either, is what does a grade represent? You know, we talked about it before. Should grades represent behavior? Should grades represent effort? Should they represent growth? We've got all these things that we want to incorporate into a grade, but at the end of the day, I would almost argue that a grade needs to represent how much of the material for this class have I mastered.
We got comments coming in, a lot of them. Okay, so let's identify some of the folks watching. Colin Heinsohn giving you some props.
I remember Colin.
Jeff Prilliman. This is from Kelly Jackson. I wish all teachers were like Jeff and had the same mindset, but unfortunately that is not the case. And Kelly's offering more perspective as we speak here on what she likes about you as an educator. This is from David Riddick. Standard of living is always a function of personal productivity. You cannot avoid this truth. Grades should always reflect quality of performance at that moment. Thoughts on that comment? Want me to read it again? Why don't I read it one more time?
Yeah, okay, you read it one more time.
Standard of living is always a function of personal productivity. You cannot avoid this truth. Grades should always reflect quality of life performance at that moment. Jeff's got something ready to rock and roll.
It's I'm wrestling. I haven't talked to Dave in a number of years, but
You know him?
I know him.
Okay.
He might be he was at the Miller School for a while. He was at Albemarle High School for a while. But it's grade at the moment, okay, yes, because I am taking whatever the assessment is today, that's the grade I earned today. But the problem gets back to the grade that we report is a accumulation of assignments. So it's the moment is actually a 9-week moment, you know, or a semester moment or a year moment. So the grade I get today, though, is the grade I get today. But then how do we meld that grade with the other assignments that I've done is the question that I would have. I don't know where you were going with that.
Lee Alberson.
Yeah, I think, well, I took it a different way, but I think just to affirm what Jeff is saying, you know, the extreme example is what my professor did and what Jeff did once, is just to say, look, show up to the final and prove that you know all the material the same as everybody else, and then that way you could defend the grade that you give that student. And then that is at the end of the semester, after they've accumulated all of the knowledge and learned all of the lessons, do they have competency in that subject? I think that's the point of education, is proving competency after they've learned all the materials. If you weight things at the very beginning the same or near the same as towards the end, you're not doing that. You're judging the process. And I think the other thing he said, the way I took it, is your standards of living. You know, I think a big thing in considering grade equity is, you know, this is a small step to trying to make things more equitable in the socioeconomic spectrum, but this isn't going to make them equitable. It's always going to depend on resources. Families with resources are always going to do better. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we can remove some of those barriers. And I think that's going back to our initial example. Families with resources, the students are likely going to come in more prepared. Many kids, especially in high school that we work with, they do summer tutoring and summer projects and summer camps that are built on education. And so,
it's one-parent households versus two-parent households a lot of times, because you can tag team a kid to make sure they did their homework, you know, versus mom is working an evening job, or, you know, the kid who has to keep their siblings or whatever in the evening. It's amazing to me that some kids can come to school prepared to learn every day when you realize what goes on at home in their lives and what they have to do. I mean, they're adults at 12 and 13 years old because of their level of responsibility. And I need to find the slope of this line. Okay, that means absolutely nothing to me.
Yeah, I'm
Fair.
trying to make sure we put food on the table tonight. Well,
Yeah.
who cares about the slope of a line?
Right. Okay, so I'll throw this to you guys. And Katie Pearl, we're going to mention your comment here and weave it into something that's come up on this network in the past. The value proposition of a private school education has never been greater. We saw that during COVID as students, and Lee, we've talked about this before, as students were able to learn in person at private schools during COVID. Students that attended public schools had a virtual learning environment. There is no secret the private schools in this area have waiting lists for days to get into their schools. And if you don't sign up early, you're probably not going to get in. Those are facts. Katie Pearl, a mom, I think, of 3. The gap will continue to grow. Private schools have never been more worth it, in my opinion. That is 100% the road we are taking as a family. Valprop and private schools versus public schools. Jeff Prilliman, I can already tell you have a lot to say on this, and this is it fair to say a touchy subject here?
So first of all, I think Elmore County is great. I think kids, because we're in it, we don't necessarily realize how good it is compared to some other school divisions. The amount of AP offerings that we have for our kids that really want to go to school, Elmore County is awesome. There are so many course offerings. There's so many exceptional teachers. We have in Elmore County, there's a huge number of teachers with doctors and masters that are teaching. Now, with that said, we talked about. I saw one of your comments about grade inflation. I think private schools engage a little bit in grade inflation. Just because if I'm
Was that on LinkedIn?
What's that?
No, I put it up in one of the
Google
resources.
Drive.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's definitely worse in independent schools.
Yeah, but I think our private schools in the area are great too. We saw.
You're hedging a little bit here, Jeff.
Well, I am. I would literally go through and rank them just because of experience in Mesa, where we had kids coming from all the private schools in the area, and we sort of found out which ones did a better job around math and science. And so that's just something where sometimes in smaller private schools where you get the same teacher multiple years, if you have a good teacher, you're going to be way ahead of the game. If you have a teacher maybe not quite as good, you're having a student that's falling behind 10% a year, even though they're getting good grades.
Lee?
Yeah, I think nationwide, and I think when we were on last year in April, I said private schools are going to have waiting lists.
And you were right.
A mile long.
You were right.
Yeah, I think what Jeff is saying is important to recognize. The value proposition for independent schools is never been higher nationwide. Now, certainly places like Louisiana, when I went to visit, where the school systems are right all the way at the bottom, the value proposition is higher because independent schools have a certain amount of standardization because of the funds that they raise. But Albemarle County Schools is ranked, I just looked it up, 38 out of 320 schools in Virginia and 1,037 out of 18,000 nationwide. So it is very high up there. So what Jeff is saying is that gap is
Good
lower.
stats right there.
But it still doesn't mean that going to an independent school is likely to yield better results if you have the resources.
Sandra Burr leaves this comment. Excellent change if enacted. Too much emphasis on grades that has ruined learning in schools. Lauren Orleans, this sounds like what they should have been doing all along. Schools should be about learning, not grades, which are poor measures of learning and aptitude. Thoughts on those comments, Jeff Prilliman?
So 100% right. It's when we talk about developing students, we want students that can think critically, that can problem solve, and all too often grades get in the way of that because you have kids. Lee mentioned failure earlier. Kids that are afraid to fail never push, never challenge themselves, and grades hinder that performance. I always talked when in my classrooms, I don't want you to do a safe project. I want you to do something and push yourself and trust me as the educator to say this is a more valuable learning experience than the one that somebody else did where they just did enough to get the A. You talk about things like rubrics, and it's like, okay, the A project will have A, B, C, D. Well, okay, that's great. As a student, I'm going to do exactly A, B, C, D. I want more out of it. And so there would be often times where my top level on a rubric would almost be undefined because I want you to push and challenge yourself and do something above and beyond. These are the minimum expectations, but I want you to push and challenge yourself. So I think the comment around grades can hinder learning is something that we're trying to get away from in Albemarle County.
Lee?
Yeah, I think, it's important to recognize what is like the objective of learning is to build, certainly to build knowledge, but also to build critical thinking so that one day when you're in a job and you're in a career, you can problem solve on your own. And, I have always been a big advocate of project-based learning because that allows contextualization of materials. I can't, at least 2 or 3 times a week, I'll have a student, I'll be either working with them or we'll be sitting in the waiting room and they'll say, why do I need trigonometry? And I'll say, what do you plan on doing? And they're like, I plan to go into, I want to be in social media and marketing. And I think you're likely not ever going to use trigonometry. So the goal of you doing it now is to see if you can think critically about solving this abstract problem, and you are going to be faced with abstract problems. And so I think trying to stay focused on what we're trying to do, which is to build those critical thinking skills. And if it's just a rubric, then students, a certain subset of students are only going to go through that rubric to get a good grade.
My favorite thing of having Lee on the show is a lot of the comparisons are reference to hobbies of mine in life, which I appreciate that. He makes it very real, and it keeps me on my toes here. So we have a ton of comments coming in. Jeff, did you want something?
It's just the when am I ever going to use that? The correct answer as a teacher is whenever you want to.
I agree. Okay, I see your point there. Eric Lee Hahn, we're going to get to your comments. Anne Marie, we're going to get to your comments here. Jeff Prilliman is getting a lot of props right now on the feed. Let's identify some of the props, and then we'll get to the questions here. If you have questions for the gentleman, put them in the feed. We'll relay them on air. Vanda Lee Sistrunk?
Yeah, Vonda. Yeah, she's
Vonda
Lee. Yeah, she's got a hair studio and she does weddings in town. She's a CIC entrepreneur.
She says,
good,
"Thank
good
you,
friend.
Lee. I always enjoy your great wisdom." Kelly, we're going to get to Kelly's comments, and then we're going to get to comments on Instagram and Twitter coming in here. Jeff seems to really be in it for the kids and learning, not just a paycheck. If all teachers were like that, there would be no need for these crazy new policies, and teachers could make their own decisions in their own classrooms. She adds, "My very bright child in the HMSA program has already figured out how to work the system and get all A's. Why study for the first test when you can take it the first time, see what's on it, and they just study those things and retake for the A? Also, she isn't really trying for the 100 because a 90 counts for the same grade and it's an A." Jeff Prilliman's nodding his head right here and chuckling.
Well, it's true. There are a lot of kids who stress to get the 98s and 99s, and there are other kids, the 92 is the same, as long as I can do that. So she's right. That's something that I don't remember hearing from Ken's Fix, though, is test corrections and being able to retake a test that I've done poorly on. And that's something that is another stickler for a lot of teachers. I gave a test, you made a 72, that's your grade. You've got another teacher, you made a 72, I'll allow you to retake it, and then I'll average your 2 grades together. You've got other teachers that will take that second grade, and it replaces the 72. And there's no consistency across Albemarle County for that. So you're an 8th grade student at Henley, I'm an 8th grade student at Burley, we're both in Algebra 1. What is happening in that grade process so that we're evaluated fairly to get into programs in high school? You're in high school and you're doing that. Now all of a sudden I'm applying to college, you made an A, I made a B, because we had a teacher that allowed test corrections or didn't. So standardizing and having some uniformity in grading, I think is very important. Now, that takes an individual element out of it, that we talked about, that professional judgment, but just that starting point maybe is where we want to be in common.
Lee Alberson.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is, I wonder if the personalization of working with a student, being able to make that judgment, I wonder if the end result for a student is they're trying to get into college, does that come out more in a letter of recommendation or something like that, where those are the elements, and we try as much as we can to hold as many things constant in the grading process as possible. As Jeff will tell you, there's tons of like grade sprinkling, right? Like you're kind of like a little magician or a cook, right? You're like putting together grades, and it's like, oh, this is a little couple extra points here, this is here, and the arbitrariness is sort of built in. The second thing I was wondering about, Jeff, is do you feel like as educators we sometimes idealize the outcome of thinking, oh, we want them to develop this great view of mathematics and science, and the kids are like, look, I want to go and I want to be a surgeon like my dad. This is all I want out of this process. I don't want to get what you're giving me. Do you think that happens?
I do. I think there are kids that take classes just because they're going to help me get into college, and I have no interest. And my daughter was a classic example, and she'll be angry.
100% that happens.
But it's like, Dad, I just took my last math class ever, and it's like, she got her score on the AP exam, and she's so happy, I'm never going to take math again.
Props to her.
It is, and she went all the way through BC Calculus, really high-level student, and it's like, as a science guy, his dad just hangs his head, it's like, okay, this just stabbed me, but there are students who understand the game that has to be played. There are students who understand I need to take AP chemistry over, AP sociology or something like that, because I'm going to this school or that school, and you probably see a lot of it because you're advising kids at a different level, but there are tons of games out there that students are playing to maximize their opportunities down the road. Grading retesting is one of those, but if you're a teacher who believes that a test can be a learning experience, then yes, I should give retest. That's one of those where I struggle with, because there's so many teachers who will give timed 90-minute test, and that's it. It's a one-shot deal. There are other teachers that like, I really want you to know this material because we're building on it for mathematics. I want you to go home and do this assignment and do it extra. So that's another piece, is when is that grade the final, this is what I have to turn in and this is what I have to report. But yeah, I struggle with that one too.
Lee Albertson, response?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the question, just asking him about when we idealize what we hope the impact is. And I think it's not just an idealization of what we have experienced in being scientists and learning, but also in what we want the system to be. But right now we're talking about changing middle school and high school systems, but it has to be affected at the college level. Otherwise, there's only a minimal amount of impact this is going to have. So I think in sort of forward thinking is this going to be better for college admissions, for your graduation rates, and are students going to find the right fit more? If so, then I think we should even take more luxuries with this process. If that's not going to be accomplished, we just need to be aware that we're sort of running up against a wall and we're trying to change the system here without thinking about the impact at the college level.
We're going to get to Jerry Lynn Farron Tehan's comment about timing, and that timing comment's been echoed by Chris Spofford of doing this coming out of a pandemic. Both parents thinking timing was not great with that decision making. We're going to get to Darren, your buddy in California's comment. Eric Lee Hahn has okay, so we have a ton of comments here that we got to get to. Okay, all right. Let me just cut to the chase. We got a ton of comments that we got to get to. So Jeff, a parent came, and Jeff, for the sake of your children, he's got a senior and sophomore at Charlottesville High School. He came, and we talked outside the studio this morning. He knew the education show was today, and he wanted us to talk this topic. 86% of Charlottesville high school students are gifted. 86%? That seems like an outlandish percentage.
That's the everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah, what the hell is that? Excuse my language.
Other stats, 50%, as of 2 years ago, 50% of all high school students got an A. So grade inflation stats, 1990 average GPA was 2.7. Last year was 3.4.
How can 86% of students at CHS be gifted? Does anyone want to tackle that topic right there?
I mean, the process by which identification is made is obviously broken. I mean, bottom line. But then how is giftedness defined? Like if you're gifted in music, is everybody who's in,
I'm being corrected by parents here. I apologize. I got the statistic wrong. Thank you, parents. Dude, this is the beautiful thing about doing this show here. If you say something wrong, you're immediately corrected. It's 86% of students in all Charlottesville schools, not just Charlottesville High School, are gifted.
Yeah.
86 total, 86%.
86% of students in all Charlottesville high school schools. 86%.
That seems
and I have
wrong.
the link that's being sent to me from the school system.
Okay, all right.
86%.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to tackle that?
He just tackled it. Something's broken.
It's in my estimation, it should be in the 5 to 10% range.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, what are we identifying as gifted? How are you identifying as gifted? Giftedness in math does not translate to giftedness in, language arts.
Definitely
Giftedness in music does not translate to giftedness. Well, a lot of times it does translate to mathematics, but it doesn't translate to giftedness in, English class or something like that. But recognizing that every student has a gift, and then recognize as a teacher, how do we, take that gift and make something special out of it. But if you're going to define giftedness, gifted students, really you're talking a single-digit number, in my estimation.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably what you would classify as like where they fall in a standard deviation, right? The way it is now, everybody. Yeah, that's almost everybody. That's the majority. I don't know how you define a gifted student. Is it gifted intellectually? Is it gifted emotionally? Is it a combination of both? Is it subject specific? You have to determine that first, and then also think about what are you doing with these gifted students? Are you putting these gifted students in always a special classroom, some special classes? And then what is the end result? If you're gifted, are you trying to help them fast track to a career that suits them best? Trying to help them skip a year? I think that there's a lot, if you're going to reevaluate it, which it sounds like you need to, that you should consider.
Jeff Prilliman and Lee Elberson, you guys are being named specifically on the feed here by multiple people. And it's not in a bad way. It's not in a bad way. It's only a good way. So this is from Lee's friend who's in California, Darren Pichota. Got it right, 2 in a row. For Lee and Jeff, I have a college student, daughter to be a nurse, and she's asking about studying abroad, maybe Austria. What are your feelings about overseas education?
Probably better. No, I'm just kidding. That
was a tongue-in-cheek joke from the
Yeah, that's right. Half kidding there.
No.
You should study abroad.
No, I actually didn't study abroad.
This is normally where he does a zing at Louisiana and says Louisiana's like studying abroad over there. That's normally something you would say over there.
Sort of. Actually, studying outside of Louisiana is like studying abroad.
There you go.
Everything is better than Louisiana because it's
always
always
does
at
a
the bottom.
zing on Louisiana.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't do. Did you study abroad?
I know.
Okay.
I didn't study abroad.
Yeah, I think studying abroad helps with perspective. I think it's really easy to get caught up in this mentality of like, oh, I need to get good grades because I need to go to college, because everything when you are at that age and you're in school is your ego is really closely tied to the one thing that you can measure, which is grades. You don't have anything else. There's not many other things that give you your self-worth, not that other things shouldn't. And so getting that perspective, I think, helps you come back and say, grades in school is important, but it's not always going to be the most important thing. I tell kids that with the SAT all the time. It's like, you're so stressed, you're going to take it, and you'll literally never think about this ever again. It's not like people go around saying, like, what was your SAT score? It's like, you never think about it ever again.
It's never. So I'm thinking the dad asked because he wanted us to say there's no advantage to it. And
I think that's what he may be alluding to.
And
that could be tied to financials.
Yeah, I think just the cultural experience. I think if you go to a school in a different country and you surround yourself with all things American at that school, then there's no advantage to doing it. I think if you take advantage of the culture and meeting the people, that it's an experience that will add to your education.
Questions coming in about timing. We will get to them. Eric Lehan has been patient on Jeff's page with comments. This just came in from Eric Lehan. Why is the focus of K-12 always? Why is the focus on K through 12 always focused only on getting into college? When can we promote the culture of what lives we want to live and who we want to be? Something to promote thinking past what college we want to get into and really what we want to make out of our lives. College, trades programs, jobs are certainly part of that. And he also adds this: what are the views with grading on project-based learning versus non-project-based learning? So he's taken a macro perspective with his first comment that school should not just be about getting into a four-year college. It should be about finding yourself, it should be about rite of passage, maturation, finding various interests, and if you find various interests, maybe one of those interests compel a profession. And then, so that's the first one. That's me paraphrasing his comment. And then the other one is, what are the views with grading on project-based learning versus non-project-based learning?
I'll throw a couple things out there because I had Frank Friedman on my Future of Education podcast.
And let them know who that is.
Frank Friedman is the president of PVCC,
right.
The local community college. And Frank, I was expecting a different view from Frank about his view of college because, sometimes community college is seen as like the little brother to a four-year college. But Frank just quotes a lot of statistics about going to college, if even only to community college, is going to improve your health. It's going to improve your earning potential, quality of life. And so that's a lot of those statistics might be correlation and not causation, but I think that is the drive, is those statistics are just constantly touted. It's like, if you don't go to college, it's going to be really tough to make as much money as you need to support yourself and your family. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I would love to be an advocate of saying, we should think about other pathways. A really fascinating statistic is that 70% of college graduates now don't end up in the profession that they studied in college.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's and you're exactly right. There's so
because
many...
we changed since we're 22 years old.
Yeah.
And we've had different interests from when we were 22, when all I cared about was
not just that,
girls, sports, and booze. Let's cut to the chase.
Well, also
I said that.
Okay, yeah.
The job market has changed tremendously.
Sure.
Like 50 or 60 years ago, you studied something. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to be a factory line worker. I'm going to be this, and I'll be this for the rest of my life. That's not the way the job market works anymore.
When I started college, we were using punch cards to code, and yeah. So it's the every 5 years, every 7 years, the world changes so fast that the jobs. This is why we need to stress critical thinking more. And then Eric mentioned project-based learning, because the job that you're going into now is different 7 years from now, and is different 7 years from now. People are changing careers, and your ability to flex, and when we talk about giftedness, your ability to look at something and how can I see myself in that new role, in that new profession, because this just changed all the engine. The fact that people can make a living through social media now, like would we have even thought, oh, hey, you can just play video games for a living and monetize it on YouTube. And
host talk shows on Facebook. Good host talk shows on Facebook.
But it's like recognizing that you don't need to go to college. There are plenty of successful people that don't. The trade profession right now needs people. Is it what's his name, Mike Rowe or whatever?
Yeah.
Just constantly talking about
dirty jobs.
I mean, it's so powerful. And then, this is something that Albemarle is looking at. They're looking at the Virginia Department of Education's the potential career fields, and they're talking about opening multiple, I would call them academies, but learning communities around those 16, 17 career clusters. So not just math and STEM, not just health and medicine,
but the trades.
But some of the trades. K-Tech is an incredible school.
Yeah.
And all too often, we put up barriers for kids to not be able to go there, but they do an amazing job getting kids ready for the workforce. And the
those
internship.
Are societal stigmas.
Oh my gosh, it is. It truly is. And the internships that they put their students in while they're there at K-Tech, so they're out there earning, some decent pay.
For sure.
And so K-Tech is an option that we should be promoting to a lot more kids that, hey, do you do this, or you want to do this, or you want to do this? K-Tech to me could be a much bigger program and have a much higher attendance at that building than they do.
I'll throw this and get out of your way, Lee, here. I had a plumber come to our house on Saturday. I want anybody to consider this. Consider how difficult it is right now to get an electrician, a plumber, or one of the tradespeople to come to your house for a job. That's how busy they are. And I was fortunate to get one to come to our house on Saturday. I cut him a check for $160. He was on site for just over an hour. Self-employed, sole proprietor, just himself. Parts were very few of that $160. That puts in perspective some earning potential and a very small sample size right there, but still puts it in perspective. Elberson, anywhere you want to go here?
Yeah, I think you have two pretty big hurdles to cover there. One is institutional momentum. Four-year colleges are not going anywhere. They are massive money-making businesses. What UVA's budget is, was it 1 point something billion? You know, there's a ton of revenue behind that, and so those organizations, you know, when they're that old and they have that much history, they don't change quickly. You know, those are big, massive container ships. That's going to take decades to change those. So those are still going to be trying to move students through. And I think the second part is probably us as human beings. There's still this class structure. Think about how many times you've been asked the question, hey, where did you go to college? Right? That's a way to class people. Where did you go to college? What do you do? Right? What those questions do is they class people. So I think as a society, we need to sort of change those and think about what inspires you, Jeff? What makes you happy, right? Like that's such a better question. Get somebody excited. Who cares where you went to college? We're trying to figure out what you're passionate about. So I think those are two roadblocks I see to trying to help students go directly to the workforce of high school.
Comments coming in. Anne-Marie's been very patient here. Anne-Marie, we appreciate your patience. Hi, Jeff! Exclamation points. She's excited to see Jeff on here. How do you politely tell your child's 8th grade math teacher that she is not challenging him? How can you suggest better teaching methods and technology? What resources would you suggest? I've pushed open middle with no luck.
So the easiest way is to open up a dialogue, I guess, and to just tell your teacher. But the problem is, I think teachers right now are so overstressed because of COVID that it's hard for me to give students extra that I'm going to, hold them accountable for. So that could be part of it. But I think you just want to ask your teacher constantly, my child gets this material, and then make sure that's the case. It's something where mom thinks the child is getting it, the teacher might be seeing something else. Have that honest conversation about why do you feel your child is getting it? Why do you feel your child needs more? And then work with that teacher. And then there's, I guess your child would also be gifted because they're probably 86% of the school. There's gifted resources, although they call them, I think, talent development now. There's people in the building that can help assign and help find extra stuff.
What do you think, Lee?
Jeff's the expert. I think that makes perfect sense. It's tough because in an ideal world, teachers would be able to see students who aren't being pushed and do what Jeff mentioned and my teacher mentioned is, hey, let's give you a side project, and that will help inspire you. Now, honestly, the responsibility is probably going to fall on the parents. It's just it's probably unreasonable to ask the teachers to stack one more thing on top of this. Adapting to COVID, adapting to a new grading. It's just like how many adaptations can you ask a person to do before, then they can't really find anything to hold on to. I was
just going to say we have a plate as a teacher, and all too often more stuff is piled on without ever taking anything off, and you just constantly feel more and more and more. And then the veteran teacher is like, well, I'm just going to keep doing my thing because there'll be a new policy again in 4 years, and so they don't even pay attention to it. So it's like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to take it back and say I love project-based learning, and I think that there's definitely certain ways that you could do project-based learning almost without teaching classes. In what ways do you think Albemarle County Public Schools is implementing project-based learning, and what do you see as the goal in 10 years?
Yeah, so project-based learning is where I fall at. It's the 11th and 12th grade curriculum in Mesa is pretty much all project-based learning. The only test I gave was a test on ethics, and then when it came time to take it, I didn't give it. And the kids were like all upset because they'd all prepared for it. And I'm like, okay, so is it ethical to ask you to prepare for something that I have no intention of giving? So that was, I just had fun with that. But the project-based learning, there would be learning objectives, working as a team, but really learning the engineering cycle, how we're going to start, how we're going to test, how we're going to modify and come back. And then, we have classes like that, but not enough students take those classes. The Health and Medical Science and the Environmental Studies Academy are both a little bit like that, where they have projects that the kids are working on, they're building, they're designing, they're doing stuff. But we probably have 12-15% of our students are engaged in true project-based learning right now, and I wish that number was 86%. It's maybe Charlottesville, maybe 86% of kids are in project-based learning, and that's why they're gifted. but it's a joke, but it's like that develops thinking skills at a whole different level than read chapter 11 and go home and outline it. That's all too often what homework and what work looks like in schools is teachers are assigning stuff that's easy to grade. Project-based learning is messy. It is trying to decide an individual grade versus a group grade sometimes. It is ways that kids can find to goof off in class if you're doing stuff. But project-based learning to me is how we should be teaching, especially some of the maths and sciences.
KJ's got some really good comments.
Agreed.
Right here.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Do you think that there's more variation in the final grade of a project-based learning class or a standard class?
There's more variation in my mind in a standard class. And the reason for that is what I'll call, we're all three working on a project. Well, you're looking over at what Jerry's doing. It's like, I like that idea. So there's constantly, I don't want to say keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Millers, but that ability to look and see what somebody else is doing. And in a project class, we're all interacting. We're using the same tools. What'd you do? How'd you solve that problem? There is a lot more interaction with students, so that the final projects a lot of times tend to have some of the similar solutions to them, just because of that constant ability to interact with peers and fine-tune your thinking. That's not a bad thing.
Well, and with
that's a great thing.
Yeah. That's a great thing. With project-based learning, you feel compelled to perform because your friends are doing work. So as Jeff has identified, you bring your A game as well. Oftentimes in standard learning, you feel isolated, almost as if you're on an island. And when you feel that feeling of isolation or loneliness, then you can either respond well to it, or you can kind of wither into a ball and not respond. And next thing you know, your performance is going to suffer.
Well, how often do I sit down and take a test, and I've got 90 minutes, you can only use a calculator on part B. That's not real life in any way, shape, or form. My resources, that's the way that I learned at a deeper level, I think. And
that's what KJ is saying here. KJ, we're going to get to your comments here. How do you, so we're talking about this. How do you feel about not grading group work? We're talking about that now. That isn't setting them up for college at all or the workforce. I want to hire people that can work as a team and problem solve. She owns, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, Kelly, a business that has 17 franchise locations in the area. And she also says, my daughter wants to be a surgeon, and if you mess up a surgery, there isn't a retake on the surgery. And then she concludes with a respectful disagreement. I respectfully disagree. Grades are important because that's how upper level education judges what students they accept, as well as outside school activities. If all education systems change their way of grading, the way they look at students, then I would agree. Kind of to Lee's point there. So why don't we go down the road of standardized tests? I made the comment when Jeff was on last time that the SAT and the ACT were the even playing field. And your response was the ACT and the SAT are being deprioritized by four-year schools, so they're less meaningful now. So this very much applies to this man's business, Claiborne Education, here. Okay, I'm going to get out of the way on this topic.
Yeah, it's 100% true. It is deprioritized, and I think I mentioned this a few shows ago. We have a pretty holistic college admissions process. As much as we want it to be more holistic, to get into college in China, you take the Kai-Gao test. You take one test. That test determines whether or not you get in. There is no essay. There is no letters of recommendation. It's one test. So, in trying to deprioritize the SAT and ACT, I think we're trying to move to a more holistic process. But if the claim is that, the SAT and the ACT are biased, I've said this before. There are.
I find that statement to be bogus.
I think no. There has been proven that there are racial and gender biases inherent in the test. I think that those are minimal compared to the resource. The resource difference in the test.
Wealthy
outcomes.
kids have resources to prepare for the test.
Yeah, they're
always
going to do better. But there is a trend. This is why the conversation is now going to grades. So if you're going to focus on grades are a perfect measure. What I would come back to KJ and say is, yeah, if you came to me and I'm an admissions officer and say, hey, grades are important. It's like, yeah, this student got a 90. Plus or minus 40 points. So maybe they might have failed or they might have passed, right? Like we're trying to reduce the error bars, that way the data is more valid. That's what this effort is really trying to get at.
What's wrong with the Chinese method of take one test to get into college? Jeff's grinning over here.
Take it.
We talk about our own experiences. I can remember the course that was 10%.
You hit 300
homework.
and you're all-star.
Yeah, all too often, the grades in the classroom, if we said you're going to take one midterm and one final, you think people are upset now? That would be because now all of a sudden I can't do that as a student because I haven't been prepared for it. So now all of a sudden I get homework, just effort, that counts for 10% of your grade, and you do this, and that's 20%, and but I would love to just give one. I mean, from a grading standpoint, what teacher didn't love that?
One standardized test.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not. You've just gotten away from.
This would be good for Claiborne.
Yeah, but I'm not on the show to try to promote Claiborne for that way.
Okay.
I will say this. I do think standardized tests like the ACT and the SAT and the CLT, which is another standardized test, do allow us to benchmark students' academic performance on a level playing field. What we're getting at, and the reason why we have holistic admissions process is just doing good on one test is not a good indicator of being successful in your career.
But isn't it the least subjective way of determining educational performance?
There's, objectivity is good in that sense, but, we want to be more subjective. So I'll give you an example. This is obviously an anecdotal example. So when I went to grad school, I was one of the only American kids I worked in a laser lab, and we did really fast experiments. And I was bolting some things on the table, and I asked one of my classmates, who was also new to the lab, to bolt something in. And then I went to unscrew it, and I realized he put a bolt 4 inches long in something that was threaded this deep. And so that's led me to believe it's like, I don't think he's ever screwed anything in. He's never done anything sort of practical before. And I think having that and being able to develop something like emotional intelligence, most employers on the front end. No, emotional intelligence.
He always goes back to the EQ.
EQ is more important than IQ. A lot of employers will give that test. Who cares how much you know if you can't interact with your coworkers, unless you're going to lock them in a room and say, just figure out this one concept. I don't know. You want to?
No. I think you're right. I'm sitting here. All kinds of ideas are running through my head.
I see that.
But I just dropped the one that I wanted to make. So no. I'm good. What's the next question?
Well, I mean, the topic that a lot of people are responding to, and we have let's call it 6.5 minutes left. Okay, we're at 1:36 right now. Time flies when you're having fun, right? This is like we're in Jeff Prilliman's class right now, and before you know it, the bell is ringing because we're having so much fun in Mr. Prilliman's class right now.
I never had problems with tardies in my class.
Yeah, the guy is an engaging personality. The topic, and I'm seeing the response from the parents, is the standardized test being deprioritized seems to be a topic of, from the scale of emotion, infuriating to concerning to uncertainty. Because we all of us, it was SAT, good score, got into college. And I made the statement on the last show when you were on here, my brother and I took the PSAT in 7th grade as part of some PSAT program, and we did well. And as a result, we were able to take that test every single year throughout 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So by the time we got to it our junior year, it was like no big deal. We went in there and we were relaxed. We're like, our friends were freaking the you-know-what out because it was their first time taking it outside of the practice test they took at home. So I can see, to Lee's point, his wheels are turning. That shows that it's not a fair or equitable situation because you just showed that I had practiced beforehand where everybody else did not. I get that, but I don't see any other least subjective method of educational performance determination.
I mean, there's the classes that you took in high school. So if I took 4 APs my senior year and you only took 2 and we both made a 1320, or are we still in the 2100?
No, it's 1600 now.
Okay, so, and we both made, 1340 on the SAT, would I get preferential admissions over you? And that I don't know. But then your 2 AP courses were calculus and chemistry or physics, and mine were, sociology and some of the lighter AP courses. And that's, each school is going to have their own classes that they want to see you take. I think for parents to call the schools that you're interested in and ask, what courses did you rather see, sometimes can impact. I know the first year of MESA, students were like, do I want to take MESA or do I want to take a 4th year of a foreign language? And it's like, call MIT, call Virginia Tech, call some of the schools that you're thinking of going to. I just put Virginia Tech and MIT in the same sentence. But,
I saw that, I heard that.
But ask them point blank, what had they rather see if you're applying to the engineering program there, You
might get some lip service there. So I will say to parents, while most of the schools have gone test optional, it doesn't mean test blind, which means you can't apply with the test. Here's my tip for all parents, and pretty much all college admissions counselors would agree with this. If your student has the ability and the time to take a standardized test, take it. Because you're applying in 2 different pools. You can apply in the test optional pool, or you can apply with a test pool. The test optional pool is extraordinarily saturated, and so what that means is you're just going to have a little bit more die rolling there. If there's like 3,000 applications and the GPAs are all pretty much the same, you want to be in a point where you have 1 extra data point to prove your competency. Furthermore, there are still quite a bit of merit-based scholarships that are based on standardized tests.
Point.
So if you have the ability and the resources to take it, take it. It is still used.
Johnny Ornelas, the owner of Guadalajara and El Mariachi, the 2 fantastic restaurants, one on JPA and one in Zion's Crossroads. Gentlemen, going back to K-Tech, I did the electrical program back in 96 to 98, and when I graduated, I had a certificate of completion that helped me get a job at a good paying rate. But I volunteered to help a non-English speaking student a few years ago, and it was a slap in the face on what they were learning and that they did not receive anything to help progress in the trade field. That was a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, Johnny, we appreciate that comment. We love you, Johnny Ornelas. Jeff Prilliman, you are refreshing, amazing, engaging, stimulating, an all-around super cool dude. Lee Elberson, I feel the same about you. I love you guys.
Jeff, I'm glad we met. This is awesome.
Jeff is just a super cool dude. How about we do this and close with some closing thoughts, maybe like a final word, final thoughts for you, Jeff Prilliman, anywhere you want to go. Got a lot of moms watching, a lot of parents.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we realize that it's impossible, and I talked about this on the last show, the difference sometimes between an 88 and a 92 is something that happened 4 months ago, and it impacts the college that I can get into. I think anything we can do to make grading more fair and to actually demonstrate what I know. There's a lot of talk about standards-based grading where we're just going to grade the skill. I think there's reasons and arguments to move towards that model, but it does put more on a teacher's plate, which is something that you always have to be aware of. But I think anything that we can do to make grading better than it currently is and less random, if you will, is a good thing.
Neil Taylor giving you some props, and it looks like some family giving you some props. Ronnie Wayne Prilliman,
Oh, okay.
Giving you some props right now. Lee Elberson, how about a final word from you, sir?
Yeah, so I think I'll just leave it with 3 sentiments. So I think that this inception of equity grading is a good thing, because what it's getting away from doing is motivating students extrinsically, and it's getting to motivating students intrinsically. We talked about this a lot last year as students were in virtual school. They didn't have any intrinsic motivation to learn. I believe that these policies will increase intrinsic motivation. I think the second thing that it helps do, and Jeff alluded to this, is it helps teachers be more explicit with what does it, like what am I expecting for A work? And so a student knows, oh, this is what I need to do to be able to put this grade A work in. I think the third thing that needs to happen is, when I was looking through ACPACE's grading policy, it's pretty sparse. It's really up to school leadership to cite the articles. There's tons of articles and references. I came up with those 20 peer-reviewed references, which Jerry will put on the show. That took me 45 minutes to do that. The school leaders need to say, this is why we're pushing this forward. We're not just coming up with this willy-nilly. There's a lot of research showing that this will work.
Kelsey, Sherling, Jerry, the show was absolutely fantastic. Please invite these guests back again. James Donovan, this show was magic. I watched from start to finish. Spencer Freeman, the show was completely engaging. Please invite the guests back again. More comments like this. Jeff and Lee, thank you kindly for joining us. You guys are awesome.
Thanks for having us, man.
People.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Judah Wickower is our fantastic director. This is the I Love Seville show. Friday, we have the former mayor of Scottsville, Nancy Gill, on the program to talk about some challenges and some tribulations and some trials in southern Albemarle County. Tomorrow, I'm back on air to talk a little Virginia football and basketball, and also a proposed 400-plus unit development in Ivy, Virginia that's got many in the Meriwether School District up in arms. And if you know the Meriwether School District and the Western Albemarle School District, you can imagine how a proposed 490-unit development is going to drive some people so crazy right there. That topic on the I Love Seville show tomorrow. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care. Dudes, you guys are awesome.
Dude.
Man, we crushed that.
That was
awesome.
fun.